Hi, Kristen. Thanks for meeting me today.
Absolutely. Good to be here with you. Thanks.
Can you just introduce yourself, and what organization you represent?
Sure. Yep. I'm Kristyn DiDominick. I'm the executive director of the Bucks-Mont Collaborative.
Excellent. And how did you come to partner with PTMA for the Getting Around Montco workshops?
Sure. So um, we have had a longstanding relationship, both at an individual and organizational level with Partnership TMA of Montgomery County. So both with Jackie in her role there and her work previously at RSVP. Jackie had been on the board of the collaborative, several years ago, um, and has been a member of the collab through her previous role, and then now her time, of course, with Partnership TMA of Montgomery County, and then organizationally, we have bartered memberships with one another for some time, so that way we both can be involved in one another's work um, at that level. And we have offered transportation workshops primarily with Partnership TMA of Montco, some with TMA Bucks, their counterpart in Bucks County, to really elevate transportation issues within our membership, as transportation is always a standing challenge for organizations whose populations and kind of missions and services are impacted by the transportation system.
And the workshops that you did it for the members of the collaborative, correct?
Correct. Yep. So we did not limit the at registration to only members. They were open, but we advertise them primarily to our members and some partners. So while they are primarily attended by the health and human services sector and predominantly collaborative members, there are a handful of other organizations that participated just because they're partners of ours and receive our news.
And what do you perceive to be the learning gap for this issue? And why do you think that there's a need for more workshops like this?
Sure. I think there are a couple of potential learning gaps. I obviously can't speak to, everyone's experience here, but I'll say that if I zoom out and the two kind of areas I see as a need and why we want to keep partnering, for many reasons. We like the organization, but also, the feel that there is a need for education is one, just like the nuts and bolts. So if you're a service provider, and this is primarily where these workshops have been targeted, is for like getting around Montco for service providers, so that it's kind of they're then informed and able to steer or guide the individuals that they're serving towards transportation solutions. So there's just that kind of like logistics knowledge that needs to be refreshed regularly as the transportation system shifts and evolves, particularly as SEPTA is one of our kind of biggest players within this ecosystem. And as they have been doing some significant strategic planning work that's been very publicly communicated, and yet, folks don't always understand or know the results of that feedback loop. So SEPTA has been asking for a lot of public opinion during its strategic planning through its bus revolution, as it was called. I know they're going to be calling it something else, but and some of its regional rail developments and shifts. And so I think just being aware of what is available, what is changing, is really important to service providers so that they can be thoughtful in how they service the individuals within our community. And then there's this kind of larger issue that transportation is just a challenge in suburban communities that have incomplete public transportation systems. And so I think that many of us look to partners like the Partnership TMA in Montco and then TMA Bucks on that side to help think through solutions. And while they are not transportation providers, they understand kind of the systems that impact transportation accessibility and are, so knowledgeable. And particularly, the staff at Partnership TMA of Montco are so knowledgeable that they are those subject matter experts that we really turn to when we're looking to understand what are the challenges and opportunities in our region to be innovative, to think about ways that we can provide solutions when we're sometimes in a transportation scarce system. And I think that Partnership TMA of Montco is also really tuned in to more eco-friendly versions of transportation solutions, like their emphasis on bike share programs and trying to think about kind of, bike lanes and alternate transportation routes. So those are two of kind of the learning gaps that I believe is why those workshops are, highly engaging and kind of attended in our community.
And after you put on these workshops, what was the response of the people that attended in
I
general?
think, yeah. Well, we do some polls and then some, post-survey questions to just, get that kind of immediate impact. And we've with I think like one exception where someone said I learned nothing, and then later in the comments, even if you look at that one piece of data, there was indication that they did. So I wonder if it was a slip of the mouse. But even if that one person is an anomaly, the majority of attendees learned a great deal. And I think that what's really interesting is that at registration, we have a lot of questions, some highly population or zip code specific, and then other kind of like larger questions. And Lucas, as a presenter, is so knowledgeable that he really touches upon the majority of those questions during the presentation. And then, I don't think that we've left a session with an unanswered question. There might have been a couple that were like so specific that they really needed kind of like a one-on-one, almost like consultation. But I found that Partnership TMA of Montco always makes themselves available. And so even if a question might feel dangling or there might be more that people want to learn, they're generous with their contact information and very available to answer questions. And so I find that people view the presentations as engaging, informative, and that the organization is seen as a resource.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And how did PTMA specifically help you bring this program to fruition? You mentioned Lucas, the speaker. Can you tell us a little bit more about him?
Sure. He is the program officer for Partnership TMA of Montco, and the ways in which we will collaborate will be bi-directional, depending on the point in time of the year. So I might reach out to them to just check in because they're kind of my go-to when it comes to transportation updates or trends, needs coming up. Or they might reach out to me to say, hey, there is, an update from SEPTA. Can we present the collab? And so their job is to really manage the content. That is not my area of expertise, but my job is to put together the collateral to market it and make sure that it gets out and kind of manage registration, and then help to facilitate the day of so that Lucas or Jackie or both can be present to be responsive to content related questions. And I can be there to kind of facilitate chat and also just kind of, curate that Q&A experience so Lucas can just be the presenter kind of giving the responses and not having to kind of manage all of those pieces. And I think that's a nice balance of voice as well in the presentation.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories to share about people who've used the information from the workshops?
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you offering more workshops in the future? I'm guessing you are because everything is always changing and information needs to get out there.
Yeah, we are. We recently met, actually, Partnership TMA and TMA Bucks and myself, we all met to talk about a session that will be, excuse me, apologies there, likely offered in like late winter, spring 2025. The date is somewhat kind of like unknown at this point because it depends on some of SEPTA's plans, and there was some stopgap funding by the state, by Shapiro, that will allow them to not avoid the termination of some of their services and lines, but it by no means was my understanding today is that it's by no means perennial. And so what that looks like for SEPTA kind of is this big question mark. And so I think we kind of will have things ready to go, but we'll be doing a joint presentation. What I'd like to see us do more of, honestly, is to build on the strengths of both organizations and their emphasis in different places. So TMA Bucks does a lot around like safety programs, and so does Partnership TMA. But I think Partnership TMA is really tuned into because Lucas's role, I think, on an advisory council with SEPTA. I think it's with SEPTA, it may be like for PA at the state level. I can't exactly tease out like who owns that advisory council. But because of his leadership work, he's really tuned into what's happening there. And they also have an emphasis again on those kind of more eco-friendly modalities for transportation. So I think combined, that's like a really interesting way to present more of, for us, again, aligned with our footprint of both Bucks and Montco, but also kind of pulling in on the strengths and the knowledge of all of the staff, a more holistic picture of transportation in the collar counties. And so I'd love to do more with both organizations, but I do find Partnership TMA of Montco to be really collaborative and ready to engage. So I really love working with them.
So I was going to ask you what it's like working with PTMA and how do you think they benefit the community? You went ahead and answered that a little bit, but can you expand on that?
Sure. They are highly knowledgeable in a system that requires a fair amount of like vigilant expertise because there are a lot of different systems and variables to follow and understand that don't necessarily, to someone who's within like the nonprofit world, while transportation touches the work we do, it's not central. Even though in reality it is quite central because we need it to get to kind of all of the different services and to be able to offer and serve. However, it's not like our primary mission. And so having a knowledgeable resource that's up to date on what's happening is a huge asset to the community. And their readiness to partner is another. I think where there's risk as they think about their mission and work is that as SEPTA evolves, or if it moves forward without enough like substantial funding, will be that they will be perceived. There is the risk of misaligned branding and that they, offer transportation or that they are kind of the source for transportation solutions alone in our community, even though that's not their role. And so they'll have to be really careful. And I know that they are, and that they do this well, but it continues, your brand is how other people see you. So even if you're trying to define it in other ways, is that they'll need to be really clear and careful about what their role is within the transportation system. And so that people can lean on them as experts in their knowledge area and not get frustrated by, ill-funded like transportation systems or other issues that SEPTA might be facing and kind of be looking to them for solutions, and they can't provide that because that's not their role. So I think that's kind of that risk of being within the transportation system, is that folks think that you offer transportation solutions and provision, when in reality you might be doing kind of what they do, which is this kind of larger, almost like, connective tissue work within our community and working with municipalities in other ways. And so that's just kind of a risk, I think, particularly if SEPTA has funding challenges and can't roll out things like microtransit or other areas of support that we want to see, is we might overlean on them for solutions.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.